So, hey, brothers and sisters, Brother Matt again. I started sharing my testimony in a previous video, and so I thought I would continue with that now because I wanted to tell this really pretty kind of interesting 9/11 story that I have. As I shared in the last video, kind of how I came to faith and how the Lord brought me back to Him when I was in my 20s. I was about 25 and I was working for this bank and, had a good job. I had a girlfriend at that time and, had a house and a car, kind of, like all the things that at 25 years old, I felt like I had all of the sort of aspects of material success that I could want. I was making good money for the first time in my life and, had all of these things. And I was going to a really great church. And my church back then did a thing called a solemn assembly, which was something they did in January of each year. And essentially it was a week-long fast. It was a church-wide fast. And so you would choose a meal, usually you chose the evening meal rather, to fast. And sometimes they would have events at the church where you would go and it was like prayer and worship, or you would stay home with a prayer partner and you would pray. But our pastor said, for this solemn assembly, I want you to pray about a breakthrough. Is there an area in your life that you really need to see the Lord break through for you, and make that kind of the focus of your prayer? And so for me at this time, I was really asking the Lord about my calling. Like, what am I supposed to do with my life? What is my life for? And so as the solemn assembly started, that's what I was praying about is for a breakthrough, a word from the Lord about my calling. How am I supposed to be used by God? And I came home from work one day later in the week, and there was a radio. The radio was on in the house. This is back when we, listen to the radio and not the apps and Spotify and all these other things we have now. But I was listening to, left the radio on because of my dog. So I would always leave the radio on somehow to keep the dog company or whatever was my thinking. But it was on a Christian radio station. And when I walked in the door from work that night, there was a commercial about Christian teachers going to China to teach English. And as soon as I heard it, I went, I know that this is what I'm supposed to do. And so I called the organization, and they were having a meeting that weekend in my town. And so I immediately arranged things to go to this meeting. And as I'm sitting there and I'm watching their promotional video and all this stuff, and I'm just sitting there going, I know that this is what I'm supposed to do. I know that this is where I'm supposed to go. And so after the video was over, they had a meet and greet or whatever. And I was talking to one of the recruiters and I said, look, man, you don't have to sell me. I'm ready to go. And he said, okay, well, we're not sure you're ready to go. We have a few questions for you, naturally. But he gave me the application and he prayed for me and he was talking to me and everything. And so I started the application process. Well, so a few days later, in the mail, I got this book that the recruiter sent me. And the book was Experiencing God by Henry Blackaby, which, this is in 2001 in the spring. And, that book was super popular back then. And inside the front cover of Experiencing God, he wrote a passage. He said, I'm praying Ephesians chapter 1, 15 to 18 for you. So this is what Ephesians 1, 15 to 18 says. It says, therefore, I also, after I heard of your faith in the Lord Jesus and your love for all the saints, do not cease to give thanks for you, making mention of you in my prayers, that the God of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of glory, may give to you the spirit of wisdom and revelation in the knowledge of him, that the eyes of your understanding being enlightened, that you may know what is the hope of his calling, what are the riches of the glory of his inheritance in the saints, and also 19, and what is the exceeding greatness of his power towards us who believe, according to the working of his mighty power. It's just an awesome passage. So Ephesians 1, 15 to 19, I guess is what he wrote. And and I didn't know the Bible super well back then, and so I looked up the passage and I read it, and I'm like, wow, this is an awesome passage, awesome prayer. It really encouraged me and everything. So this was in March, April 2001. Like I said, I was working for this bank, and as I'm going forward with this organization, and they decide that they're willing to accept me for the fall semester, I realized this is going to mean a total reorientation of my entire life. And so I went to my boss at work and I said, listen, this is going to sound crazy, but I feel like I am supposed to go overseas to be an English teacher. And so I'm planning to quit my job and move overseas to begin teaching in the fall semester. And my boss said, okay, well, that's great, but just wait a minute, because there's actually something that we need to talk to you about. And I said, okay, well, what's going on? And they said, well, actually, this office of the bank is going to close down, and we are recruiting out everybody in this office to different corporate offices all over the U.S. Now, I worked in not in like a branch, but in like the corporate side of this bank. And so they had been recruiting out all of the other people on our team, like trainers and things like that. And I was an instructional designer, designed training material for within the bank. So they said, what we want to do is we actually want you to move to the New York office to work there. And they offered to double my salary, which this is in 2001. Certainly would have been more money than I had ever made up until that point, and would even be, more money than I'm making even now, 20 years later. So the other kicker is I used to live in New York City. When I was 18, I had lived there for a year. When I did a year of school there, and I loved the city, but I was dirt poor, had no money. So I still had friends in the city. And had always wanted to go back to the city. And so suddenly I had this huge temptation to take this job in New York and, and take the money. And, it was a good job. I liked the bank. I liked who I worked with, and certainly I'm sure the Lord could have used me there. But it was a huge temptation, because it was either choose that or sell everything you own and move overseas and make, no money at all. Like whatever we made a month was like maybe $500 a month or something like that. And I said, I appreciate the offer, but I can't do this. I have to do what the Lord's telling me to do. So I quit my job and I sold everything I owned. And in August, got on a plane and flew to China. And the first day that we were there were all these other little details and little things that happened. But the first day that we were there, they took us to a Chinese church. Now, China has different kinds of churches. They have a public church that's called the Three Self Church, and then they have underground church. And so they took us to a Three Self Church, which is the public church, and just typical kind of what you would imagine, pews and all these other things. And they have a lot of old churches that had been built before the communists took over in the 40s, and this was one of those older churches. And so we went in, all these English teachers, to kind of get our first experience in China. And I remember, man, I was just like stunned and amazed. It was raining that morning, and so we came in through the rain, and everybody's packed into the church. All the Chinese brothers and sisters were there, and standing in the aisle and looking around just in total awe at how God had brought me all the way to this place that I was standing. I mean, it's just unbelievable, right? And I look up on the wall, and they had, I guess they had like, sometimes in old churches, they have a little sliding thing that they put like the hymn numbers and stuff on, and sometimes the Bible passage that they're studying. So this church had something like that. And it had the Bible passage that they were studying that day. And the Bible passage was Ephesians 1:15-19. It was the same passage. And so from that moment, I knew that was just for me. And I knew that I was standing exactly where the Lord wanted me to be standing. I was exactly where I was supposed to be. And that just was such a word from the Lord for me. But it was punctuated by the fact that about 3 weeks later, 9/11 happened. And the office that I was going to work in the bank, was in the Trade Center building. So when 9/11 happened, I knew that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. And I knew from that moment on that the safest place that I could ever be, the safest place that any of us can ever be, is to be in the will of God and to be following him where he leads you to go. And he confirms those things. He gives all kinds of confirmations and encouragements and things along the way. But for me, I knew from that moment that I have to live my life in obedience to him. So that was how I got called, overseas, how the Lord confirmed it, how the Lord spoke to me and led to me spending almost 20 years in Asia before coming back to the U.S. And so that's my story. I've been wanting to share that with you guys for a while, and I pray it will be an encouragement for some of you. I know many people are kind of looking for that. What is their calling? What are they supposed to do in the Lord? What does the Lord want you to do? And he will lead it. He will show it. He will confirm it. He confirms things through his word. He confirms things through other people. These are all the ways that the Lord speaks. So anyway, I wanted to share that with you guys. I pray to be a blessing to you today. And I'm grateful for all of you. God bless you. And I'll talk to you some more later.